how did 2020 affect air traffic control, air traffic management, and flight operations? Here we have Vincent from FofATM, Vincent Lambercy. Please, Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan-Willem. The biggest change, the thing that occurred for air traffic management was basically a 180-degree turn. Air traffic management is an industry that has been here for decades to first create capacity and then manage a demand that is over the capacity. So basically, until now, we always had more flights than we could accommodate. And the whole industry was built up to manage that over demand. And all of a sudden, we are in the completely opposite situation where we have much more capacity than demand. And that required a lot of adaptation. You probably remember in March and April, we have seen even general audience media articles on airlines operating empty flights just to keep their slots, so the right to operate at certain airports. Because that mechanism was here to manage the overcapacity, and all of a sudden, it became something that forced airlines to operate flights that were economically and environmentally not making any sense. And luckily, the industry adapted quite quickly, and these rules have been waived for at least a few months. And you can also see reports from Eurocontrol where they say, look, every route over Europe is now 8% shorter. And it's not because it would not have been possible, and it would not have been possible before, but because we have so less flights, we can optimize a lot of things. So the industry really changed from always being at the edge of the available capacity to managing a much smaller demand. And that was one change. The other thing is we had to manage and find a way to keep air traffic controllers' skills sharp and current. As you know, air traffic controllers have licenses just like pilots, and they have to work a certain number of hours on different parts of the airspace to keep their license valid. And the question is, how do you keep these licenses and these skills valid when you have much less traffic? It means when sectors are closed, so you have much less controllers working. You are still paying them and you don't want to lay them off because air traffic controllers are highly specialized and very long to train. The training takes up to 4 years. So you don't want to follow or fire your air traffic controllers, but you have to keep them sharp. And the same thing is applying to the training pipeline. When you have a trainee, which is a few weeks or a few months before its qualification, it did cost a lot of money to train him, to find him, to bring him up to speed. And then you need the traffic to finish the training and validate them. And one move that we've seen is that simulation took a much more important role. Simulation is always used in air traffic control. But now some ANSPs like DSNA in France even uses simulators to validate licenses. And this is something that has been in the air if you speak with the training department for long. But the regulator were always thinking, simulation, it's not like the real deal. It's good, but it's different. And now it's possible, and it has been approved because it was a must. And if you look at the very specific case of DSNA, it's not a temporary thing. It is really a change of the training manuals, the training procedures. So it is something that will last for more than just COVID. And I think that will be one of the questions tonight, to see how much of the changes we see now are just to survive COVID and will vanish afterwards, and how much of them will remain for the longer term.
And Vincent, I think you already triggered some interest. There's actually one question from Rebecca Meldrum. Do you think that the 8% shorter will remain as a normal level, or no, will remain as normal levels return? Or are these temporary improvements? What do you think?
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Rebecca. You have to look at it in a broader scope of what we call free route airspace, which is basically saying you enter a controlled area at a point and you can go from here direct to every other point. You do not have to follow pre-published routes. And this is something that has been implemented and has been rolled out over Europe before COVID happened. And that helps already a lot to shorten the routes. Now, it's easier for pilots to always get direct routes, but it's much more complicated for air traffic controllers. The point is, when you have a network of routes, you know where conflicts can happen. Conflicts can happen where you have crossings, but nowhere else. When you have everybody flying direct routes, conflict can occur anywhere, and the management and the lookout for conflict is much more complex and requires actually technical tools for that. Now, you can do much shorter routes for now in some airspaces which are less congested because you have less conflicts and less traffic. So I guess in some margin, the route has been adapted, the route network has been adapted, and it will be adapted again when capacity and demand comes back. But there will probably still be some bottlenecks that will survive. In preparing that webinar, we discussed about pilots not getting holding patterns when flying into London Heathrow, for example, which is unusual for now. But when the demand will come back, these kind of things will come back again because the capacity will not be that much extended. There will certainly be improvements thanks to the reviews and the deep redesign of some elements, but major structural bottlenecks will probably still be there.
Thank you, Vincent. Very interesting point, especially on ATC professionals and how the training goes now. That's fantastic. Thank you once again. Natalie, the floor is yours. Please, we can discuss flight operations now.
Sure. So throughout my time with Signal, I've seen companies that are always curious about campaigning for change using scientific methods. But in 2020, we're definitely starting to see that companies are looking to enlist the help of psychology and nudging to cut waste wherever possible, and that from pilots to dispatch to operations and on the ground. And technologies that are low barrier to entry and low cost are going to become paramount to starting to alleviate some of those marginal gains. Aviation's laid off tens of thousands of employees right now, and IATA is predicting a 400,000 billion loss, or half of 2019's earnings. So there's just been more discussion, and in addition, there's been more discussion on how to regulate airlines to bring them to net zero or reduce carbon. Regulation and taxing are becoming standard speak in marketing and PR, and operations in response of gearing up for some of that. And so if you go to the next slide. We're seeing that airlines are asking for behavioral change beyond flights and then other silos, like flight planning and dispatch, making sure that all an operation begins with an efficient standard, as well as into cargo and private airlines. For the first time, we've been approached by individual charters, as well as groups that are concerned with the uptick in private flying that they've been able to do, and bringing their operations to something that's more sustainable. If you go to the next slide, please. And then we've gotten a lot of requests for behavior change across whole processes, like I had mentioned earlier. So every part of a turnaround process being coordinated, from ground handling, crew, cleaning, and fuel, to be something that is dialed into the second, the minute, in order to enable for the least amount of fuel to be burned and the least amount of energy to be taken up. And also being able to take all of that data and information and review it with several different terminals, so that they can share that information with not just one airline, but multiple others to learn from it. If you go to the next slide, please. And in addition, I think one thing that's been nice to consider about this as well is that 2020 has been stressful for everyone. So reviewing how to get feedback from all employees across all different positions, checking in on how passengers are affected and gathering their feedback on how they've been handled and how the process has been working has been really important. And it's been brought up in multiple different ways about how to conduct surveys and how to understand exactly what employees are saying qualitatively rather than just the data. And keeping them engaged and involved. Some of the pilots that we've been working with as far as advisors have actually left for different careers out of concern of what's going to happen in the industry. And then others are being poached by different airlines. And so airlines want to dial in and see what their employees are actually thinking about, and using a softer touch tool or something that isn't necessarily just so removed from people, right, I think is going to be important. And in considering that, I think that there will be some changes into making this a bit of a healthier industry, a bit of an industry that's focused on keeping an individual and their training in the future.
Okay, Natalie, Vincent, thank you so much. Jan-Willem, do we have questions from the floor for Vincent and Natalie? Great.
We actually have very interesting questions. What I would like to do is, Yusuf, you asked a very interesting question. We will come back to this topic later on, so I would like to just park it for the moment. I will definitely get back to you, Yusuf, on your question. Sugandhi and Daniel. So Sugandhi Jayaraman asked, how do you think airports and airlines are going to buy into investing in innovation and digitization, considering that they already have shrinking revenues and lower demand owing to the pandemic? And the same or a similar question was actually asked by Daniel Stecher, a dear friend of mine from IBS. Which airlines, and sorry, I have to grim at this question, which airlines are really making use of the low traffic times in order to go and start the necessary business transformation projects and really digitize airline operations processes in the operations control center? Which airline did this since March? I'm only hearing hectic times and survival mode, and all the experts are furloughed and not available to run the transformation projects. So both of you, thanks a lot for this super interesting questions. And I think Sugandhi, you phrased it a bit nicer, but Daniel, you basically hit the nail on the head. And before I share my opinion on this, anyone from the panel that has an opinion and that wants to share their experiences over this year? Do you have an airline that actually bought your product or that actually used your company to digitize and innovate?
I think I would like to quickly jump in here. It's part of the discussion that we're going to have as well shortly about the passenger growth. I think the big challenge is not right now. Right now, everybody's in survival mode, but it's in preparation for when the passengers are coming back. And I think there is the big question is, how long can the airlines and airports wait to prepare to get back to kind of the normality and put the new solutions in? And my personal opinion is that a lot of airlines and airports will simply be driven to have innovative solutions for various reasons. Lack of staff, short term, getting them back, and so on. So I think it's going to be a necessity. Just imagine having a vaccine coming up and suddenly for summer, no more problems in flying. We'll see a huge boost in passengers wanting to travel. And I think that's really where then everybody will have to just do something. And probably innovation is going to be and new technologies. A lot of companies, suppliers are ready to do it. And I think everybody will jump in and help and support as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. I agree. And I think also, Sugandhi, to come back to your question specifically, I think there will be an unintuitive truth, and we will come back to this a little bit later, but it's in my opinion, it's not so much about how or if airlines and airports will invest in it because they have lower revenues, but because they have lower revenues, I strongly believe there is no other choice than investing into digitization. Connecting this with Daniel's comment, honestly, I feel the same way. I have not seen any investment that was not already signed 2019 or 2018 and just installed or or rolled out this year, and then there was a press release about it. I think, but I think 2020 did one thing to the industry. Yes, it was still not bold enough, or there were very few, let's say there were very few players that were bold enough to actually invest and take this opportunity. There's a very nice McKinsey study that actually shows that those companies that invest in the downturn, that invest right into innovation in the middle of the crisis, are among the best performers when it comes to return on investment and shareholder value 5 to 10 years after the crisis. But I think what 2020 did is that it pushed innovation, digitization, less redundancy, less relation to manual processes, much more into the focus. And I guess if we now go into the next bit where we speak about how the whole year 2020 changed airport operations and later on also apron operations, we will see even more that there are certain pockets where innovation really, or where the pandemic drove innovation and also drove investment in innovation. But I guess we will come back to your questions throughout the whole kind of panel discussion. So thanks a lot, really good questions.
Yeah, and we have one follow-up question also from Daniel and one from Wahid.
Maybe I can comment a bit also on that based on our experience, because we've seen exactly what Daniel has described. A lot of organizations, especially bigger organizations, airlines, airports, have somehow a bit stuck in that progress of, let's say, just focusing on their own and how to reduce costs. And they lost a bit, let's say, the track on how to innovate and how to get back into a mode of looking forward. And I think, in my belief, it's 11:45 actually. Yeah, they really need to use that time that we have right now to bring those innovations into place, because that reboot will happen at some time. And when this happens without innovating now, this could hit even more and even harder than this crisis already did. So I think it's really the best time now to move ahead. And I think that somehow is also the in like Daniel's comment, we are now in the position to do so. We've never had that low traffic. So now we have the best opportunity actually to do that kind of change, because when traffic is back, everybody will argue, okay, we can't make this IT change or that digital change because of the operational consequences. Now there's the time to do, and we should use it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think the timing thing is one of the challenges here. Is no one knows when the vaccines are going to be at a level where traffic's going to start to come back, and when governments are going to start relaxing quarantine periods. So there's that as well. And I think we've seen some airports have run some of the capital programs, like, they've used this opportunity to resurface runways and do some of the things that are really difficult to do when we're really busy. And many airports and airlines will probably focusing on how do they manage very congested airfields or or times when it's particularly busy. And actually the model's now changing, and it's not so much how do we manage it to be really busy, it's how do we manage this ramp up. And the industry has never had anything like this, so they can't fall back on experience of people going, I remember this when.
Yeah,
and that's one of the challenges.
And Daniel, maybe, although it might be a weak point, but at least it's a point. There's one thing that I realized where I was very, very surprised. In my whole career, when I saw RFPs, was always a request for a cloud-based installation. And then when you answered the RFP and the IT team finally got into the game, then the cloud-based installation was very quickly removed and exchanged for an on-prem installation due to data security and yeah, they wanted to have everything on their side. And this year I've actually been very surprised, because we had 2 projects where the customer actually said, no, we want to do cloud-based installation because we want to reduce our financial kind of burden in the future and become much more flexible. Again, it's just a small part, but I think it shows some kind of development also in the thinking that digitization is not just making your operations more efficient and having some cool looking new GUIs and using AI for whatever reason. But I think more and more people in the industry understand that digitization can help them to become much more flexible on a cost basis. So let's just keep fingers crossed that this will also continue in the next years. Regarding the other questions, I mean, we get so many good questions. We will come to all of them, but I would say some of them will also be answered throughout the next couple of minutes